Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here at Intersections. I'm Connie Ryan. I'm the Executive Director of Interfaith Alliance of Iowa, and I'm really glad to have each of you in the room and everyone who is online as well. This is our second to last Intersections of this school year, and then we'll start planning for the next year. We take off the summer months. If you would like to be part of the planning team of this, we have a stellar group of people who work on the plans for the next year. And if you're interested in that and want to bring some ideas to us, we're always open to that and would welcome you into that planning process. But for today, we are going to talk about food insecurity, and it's an important subject matter that is impacting so many different communities. And there's a lot to say about what's happening at the legislature and at the federal level as well that's impacting that is in Iowa and in our communities. But I'm delighted to have Clint Twedt-Ball, who is the executive director and founder of Matthew 25, and I know you all know that organization well, I'm quite sure. But he's going to bring us some information about what's happening in the state and in this community and the work that they do as an organization. So I'm going to just turn it over to Clint. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Connie. It's great to be here amongst all of you today. And what a wonderful group this is. I see so many familiar faces, some new faces. So I'm going to assume that you know a little bit about Matthew 25. I'm not going to go into all the specifics of Matthew 25. I'm going to stay focused on food. But again, it's great to have you here. I find that for myself right now, solidarity is a really important thing as we kind of go through what kind of feels like the spin cycle of a washing machine being jostled all about. Nothing has given me more strength and hope than being around other folks that have a similar view, that are working on issues that are both local and global, and that understand that we are connected to people not just within this room, but all over the globe. So it's good to be with you. I want to thank Connie and Kristen and the whole team at Interfaith Alliance of Iowa. I can't overstate how important it is for them to help all of us together to work in a united way and to inform us and to help us to live our faith in action. And I want to thank St. Paul's, that I take great pride in this being my home church, and love being here amongst people and having Pastor Jonathan as our pastoral leader in a very transformational way. I just appreciate his leadership. So great to be here amongst all of you. So with that, I'm going to jump into a little bit about Matthew 25 and kind of food in general and faith. We say this prayer, some of us, quite frequently, that has at its core, give us this day our daily bread, right? And almost every day, I think about this and I head in the morning and I walk into Matthew 25. I walk into the back door and I walk through Groundswell Cafe, which, if you've never heard of it, is a pay it forward cafe where anybody can come and eat and choose healthy, delicious food off the menu. And if they want, they can give a little extra. And if they can't afford to pay for lunch, they can just come in, breakfast, lunch, have a free place to eat, a nice calming atmosphere, a place where they are sitting around other people that are from all different walks of life. So I walk in through this space, and usually I see a group of a whole variety of people there. We open at 7 a.m. and there's often people standing outside waiting in the cold, whatever the weather, to come inside so that they can be in a warm place and get some food. And it is a crowd that maybe you walk by and see some of them sitting in Green Square Park or sitting in front of buildings or laying next to the river, people that are homeless, right next to people that are leading our community as mayors, city council people, business leaders. And when I walk through that crowd, I have a choice to make every day, right? How am I going to view that crowd? Am I going to have it be a sad experience of seeing people that I just kind of think, oh, why aren't they doing better? Why aren't they out there working? Why aren't they pulling themselves up by their bootstraps? Or do I walk through and feel like this is a little glimpse of the kingdom of God? This is that banquet table spread out so that everybody can eat from the abundance. We every day get to make that choice of how we are going to see food insecurity in the world, right? So I want to think about this prayer. It says, give us this day our daily bread, right? It doesn't say, give me this day my daily bread. It says we all must share and be responsible for each other's daily bread. In fact, if you look at a whole lot of religious texts from a variety of faith perspectives, much of the language is communal. Matthew 25, I was hungry and you gave me something to eat. It's actually Jesus saying, I was hungry. I was that homeless person. I was without, and you helped me, regardless of how I looked. The Jewish faith, talking about if among you one of your community should become poor in any of your towns, you shall not harden your heart, but shall open your hand to them. In Hinduism, the wealth of the generous person never wastes away. Those who possess food and don't share will find no comfort. In Buddhism, stories tell of kings and monks giving away their own food to feed the hungry. Hunger is seen by all the world's great religions as a communal problem, not just an individual problem. So what does hunger look like in Iowa? Where does it exist? 10% of Iowans that face 10% of Iowans face hunger. 1 in 6 of those are children. SNAP benefits, you can see, is about 10% of Lynn County residents, with another group of people almost as big that don't take it because they've heard many stories about how you don't want to be those people that receive that support, right? And the amount is relatively small. I mean, if you listen to people talk, you would think that we're making people rich off of their SNAP benefits. It's not very much. 57% of Cedar Rapids Public Schools students are eligible for free and reduced lunches. This is who is receiving these benefits. It's not, it's kids largely. It's people that that are fairly innocent, right? And you can see that yourself that this is often the moms that are single parents. It's the elderly that are on benefits. And we've kind of, over the years of my life, switched our rhetoric around this sometimes. We used to always talk about welfare queens, right? And those people that they just have more kids so that they can keep getting more and more benefits. Now, if you read the paper, it's those 20-something boys that are just playing video games and they're sitting on the couch and they don't actually want to work. And neither of those is true, right? Those are the exceptions to the rule. We tend to focus on the aberration when we're against something instead of the actual people that need support, and the people that are struggling, the people that look like us or people that we want to help. So in our cafe, we see also that it's people with serious addictions, people with serious mental health issues. Often it's people that's all wound up together to a place where they have a hard time even functioning. And the last thing that is going to make them function, right, is a threat of, well, if you just we're going to take these benefits away if you don't work. They really don't care. They are literally living off the trash of our society, eating out of dumpsters often, knowing which restaurants throw away food so they can go get it, living out on the streets or in tents. They don't care if you are going to threaten them with taking away benefits. This is what hunger looks like in our society. And virtually every safety net that we have in place to help those kids, to help the elderly, is under threat right now. For the last several years, we've worked, just as an example, we've worked on the Double Up Food Bucks program, which essentially says we're going to incentivize you to make really good choices. So if you go into a grocery store and you choose to buy with your SNAP benefits healthy food, we will double that. We'll give you money so that you can buy twice as much. If you go to a farmer's market and you're supporting our local producers and farmers, we'll double what you can buy. And it's been a great program. Well, this year, if you've read, the legislature said maybe we should give more money and double that, scale that in size because it's been working so well. But we'll tie that to the fact that you'll have work requirements in order to receive any assistance. So it's like even these things that are working really well as carrot approaches, we feel like we have to have a stick. And over on top of that, we're just taking things away. I don't know if you've read about food trucks that were loaded up with food, ready to go to food banks, and were like called off, funding cut. We'd rather let the food rot on the truck than send it to the food banks. We're cutting the bottom out of so many of these programs, taking away money that was already allocated to support people and saying, you know, well, due to fraud and waste, we need to just get rid of this program, of things that were working well. We're doing that to small scale farmers that want to produce locally and had been promised contracts to go give that food to food banks. We're taking away that money after they've already planted their crops, after they've bought their seed, because we don't want to help them. So that is part of what food security looks like, part of what we're struggling with in the legislature. In addition, I think one of the things we don't think about in our society is that food insecurity is also tied to a whole lot of other issues. So if we look at the diabetes rate in the US and how that correlates with poverty, with people that are food insecure, the diabetes rate goes up in every single low-income neighborhood because of what's being put into people's bodies. America's obesity problems in the neighborhoods where Matthew 25 works, obesity is over 50% in 5th grade in some schools because of the quality of food that's being eaten. Highly processed, highly fat. So we decide what we're going to give people that are food insecure often is very unhealthy, cheap, highly processed food. And the cancer rate, more and more we're tying cancer to the things that we put into our bodies in terms of our food system, right? The cheaper, unhealthy foods that also leads to high cancer rates. And then more and more, we're also shifting who has access to healthy food. There was legislation through the late 70s that made it so that when groceries were sold, they couldn't have different prices based upon buying power. So small town grocery stores could get the same pricing, were mandated to get the same pricing federally that urban places like Walmart could get for grocery stores. Now we've kind of taken that away and we've seen a decline of thousands and thousands of small town grocery stores so that people have no longer had access to fresh produce within 20, 30-mile radiuses throughout the state. All of this leads to these massive places of inequality. So I want to talk a little bit about Matthew 25 and our vision, because we're trying to attack food insecurity in a holistic way. So our vision talks about We envision thriving, connected communities with sharing economies where all people are valued, talents are multiplied, and neighbors live healthy, nourished lives full of opportunity. Maybe it's audacious, but like just ending hunger isn't enough for us. We want to see people putting healthy food into their bodies that nourishes them and gives them energy for a good life to be lived so that they can live into the full abundance of what God has called them to be. So, on a practical level, how do we do this? We work on placemaking and making the healthy choice the easy choice. If you remember the Blue Zones initiative that was touted by Governor Branstad several years ago, at the core of it was how do we make it so that in every place in the state, people have the ability to make the healthy choice the easy choice? So, how do we make neighborhoods like the ones I work in not be full of fast food, bars, that kind of thing, but how do we make it so that they can walk into their neighborhood convenience store, their neighborhood uh, diner, and actually have access to healthy food? That's the vision that we have. And so, how have we done that? In 2011, we created the state's first urban farm. We helped the city to put in new legislation that would allow there to be urban ag permits. Believe it or not, at that time, this was like a huge battle in the city. City council people were like, we don't want anhydrous ammonia trucks coming through our town. We don't want like combines coming through our streets. And we're like, no, 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 it's a whole different type of ag that we're talking about. And so eventually they worked with us. They sold us 18 vacant lots for $1 so that we could kind of prove this concept and take a place that had been blighted, full of vacant foundations and leftover remains from the flood, and turn it into a place of beauty, take a food desert and turn it into a food oasis. So this 2.5 acres has become a major hub of community in that neighborhood where we have pizza nights and farmers markets and teach kids about agriculture and hire 15 students to work during the summer and learn job skills and learn how to grow food. And for many of them, for the first time, eat food freshly picked out of the field that day. We added to that in 2018 with Groundswell Cafe that I talked about before. We had run a free lunch program and we felt like we were feeding people, we were putting calories in their bellies, but we were not helping them to access healthy food or really be in a healthy environment. And so the whole goal of Groundswell was to create that dream space so that people could come in, feel relaxed, eat good food, not have, if they're on the streets where they have no access to an oven or anything else, they can come in and have something made for them to help them through the day. And then in 2022, we had come across this building, was on the highest crime corner on the northwest side, and it had been a rotating series of bars for many years. There was a haircutting place in it that they said actually made more money off of selling other things under the table rather than haircuts. So when it came on the market, we bought it. We didn't know what we were going to do with it, and we were trying to figure out what's this going to be. Should we just resell it and put restrictions on the deed so that it can only be certain things? And I praise Jonathan, who was on our board at that time, for being part of a group and saying, well, we could resell it, but what could we do that would really be the best for the neighborhood? About the time he was suggesting that, another board member brought somebody that said, I've been a small town grocer for 40 years, and I'm the third generation person in my family to have done grocery business. My great grandfather started a grocery business over in western Iowa, started really out of the back of his wagon selling supplies, and then was able to build a building. He said, I just want to do a grocery store where I can be focused on helping people in a neighborhood that doesn't have access to groceries. And so we said, well, we've got this building. He walked over, he saw the building, he said, that's the exact same building that I grew up in over on the other side of the state. Both Lebanese immigrants, both had started things 100 years ago. This was first a grocery store in the 1900s based on the same building plan. He said, I want to turn that back into a grocery store. So we raised about $1 million and moved, rehabbed the whole building and turned it back into a grocery store. If you haven't been there, I really highly suggest it. It's got great produce. It's focused on a lot of local products. It's got grab and go meals that are healthy meals that you can grab at a low cost. And you can walk in, out, see everything in there in about 5 minutes. It's got 1 aisle, 2 aisles-ish. So it's a great place to be, and it's become, again, a hub of community and gathering and a place where we can push the concept of health. And then, like I said, we have education programs that teach kids like how, from a young age, do you grow food, harvest food, supply that food for yourself, be able to can it, preserve it so that you can eat food that is healthy all year long. I don't know about you, but like I grew up in a family where we just did that, right? We always had at the parsonage a big garden. My parents managed to feed 5 kids on a pastor's salary because they had a big garden. And so some of it's just about going back to some of those old concepts and working really hard to make sure people that are often living in apartments have access to land and knowledge and tools so that they can grow their own food. Like I said, we hire 15 youth during the summer that come out and learn on the urban farm. And we do a variety of other programs for the whole community to teach about food. So if we do our work well, virtually everyone in the neighborhood around the time check area should be impacted. People who live in the area will shop with us or dine with us and maybe give a little extra. People with financial means and those without will kind of brush up against each other naturally and build relationships that maybe they wouldn't otherwise have. I know that there are people in this room that have been in the cafe that have probably just in some small way built a relationship with people that they probably wouldn't have if they hadn't stepped into the cafe that day. And sometimes it's jarring. Sometimes you see things that you're like, I really wish that person was making different choices, or I wish that their life was different. But I think it's in that risk taking, that willingness to push ourselves out of our comfort zones that we begin to solve these problems. If we do our work right, it will be things like a neighbor with just a little square foot garden in the side of their yard, growing a bunch of zucchini and getting to the place where they say, I've had enough zucchini. I'm going to take my extras to the corner store so that other people can come in and they can pick it up for free. Or I know that there's an egg problem and I have backyard chickens and I can't even keep up with all their eggs, so I'll take their eggs into the corner store so that other people can come in and have free eggs. If we do our work well, we will, in some small ways, kind of create that kingdom of heaven on earth where people just naturally share out of their abundance. I'm a big believer that government has to do its part, right? But I'm also a big believer that we as a community can't just say, oh, that's government's job. It's all of our jobs to help each other, both through paying taxes, but also through our natural everyday choices to help our neighbors. It really does go back to this idea of giving us our daily bread. This is what food security looks like when we care for our neighbors. So I want to end by saying that if we look at our own prayers, right? Our own prayer life, our meditation, our centering, whatever spiritual practice we do to kind of ground and center us. If we look at that only as being focused on ourselves and giving ourselves comfort, then I think we've missed the point. All of these things are tools for growing ourselves individually, but also for connecting us to the community, to one another, and to the world as a whole. Prayer should motivate us to be willing to take risks for those that are struggling. It should motivate us to action. At its core, the Lord's Prayer is about turning a common sense vision of selfishness on its head and creating a shared vision of abundance and possibility. It is about asking for God's kingdom and will to be done so that the last and the least might be uplifted and might be encouraged to live into the fullness of who God created them to be. And so I just want to invite you, wherever you are, to connect with some place that is calling on you to do this good and faithful work. Love to have you connect to Matthew 25 in any way that you can, but also I know that everybody has their own gifts and their own places they connect. And so if it's not Matthew 25, just find somewhere to connect, to be in solidarity, and to think beyond yourself. Thank you. And I think we have time for questions, right?
If you have questions in this space, we can only have you come to the microphone because they're wired mics. So if you'll come up, for folks on that side, if you just come around to this side and ask your questions. And I know that Clint knows everything and we'll be able to.
I said I can just make up stuff.
That's
if
right.
Nothing else. That's what us pastors do.
Yeah,
so yeah,
right.
We'll be all right. Yeah.
Hello, Clint. Thank you for such a good overview of the great work that you do. For those of you who have not eaten at Groundswell or shopped at the corner store, hurry, do it. It's fabulous food in both places. We appreciate having a neighborhood store, so thank you for that. Now, something to add to your list of programming, because you used the word canning.
Yeah.
And I see my friend Nancy across the way, who is an expert canner. But I attended a class at the Groundswell Cafe, a cooking class. And I know you've got another cooking class coming up. And I'm just wondering if you would consider a canning class, perhaps, you know, a way to deal with some of the abundance. I'd love to learn to can. I'm a city girl. And if you could do that, I'd sign up immediately.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I love that. Yeah. Thanks,
Okay.
Libby.
Okay.
And I will tell you, in terms of classes that we do, we have a all-season gardening class. So for people that have never gardened before, they can learn from like how do you choose seeds, do seed selection, all the way through how do you harvest and preserve. We also have done classes that are on, you know, freezing, canning, that kind of thing. We have in our tool library had the canning equipment so that people can check it out and be able to come in and do their own canning. I have to admit, I grew up around canning and it still terrifies me. I remember one time my grandma canning and the thing shot off, you know, and like hit the roof, and I was like, the whole house is going to explode. It can be a terrifying thing, right? But it really is not a horribly complicated thing to do. So yeah, we'd love to have people sign up for those classes. I don't know if they're already on the calendar yet this year, but yeah, it's an important thing. Yeah. Other questions? Oh no, Brad.
I know. This might be as bad as you imagine.
Yeah.
Well, actually, first of all, I would also like to echo comments about all the great things Matthew 25 is doing under Clint's leadership. So given the information you started with, all the scripture and everything about, taking care of others and so forth, and given that you're a recovering pastor, and that I really wanted to ask you an impossible question.
Yeah, right. Mm-hmm.
So given all that scripture, why is it that so many Christians are so concerned about who people love, who people live with, who has sex with sex, and not so much with feeding people and taking care of the poor? See, simple question.
Yeah, simple question. We're going to be here a while, but no. Well, let me start out by outing Brad in some ways. Brad was our board president at one time, and it was during the flood of 2008. And at that time, Matthew 25 was a literally $30,000 a year back of the napkin budget size organization with like my brother and I both part-time. Fortunately, we had wives that had decided to support this ministry thing of ours and gone back to work so that they could help pay the bills while we started Matthew 25. Anyway, we got to the flood, and we had this budget, and we were like, our building is destroyed, a chunk of the town is destroyed, our programs can't function, we got to move to a whole new space. Like, what are we going to do in terms of budget? And Brad was like, let's just throw it out the window and we'll do whatever we need to do and respond however we need to respond. And really, it was that leadership ability to pivot and say, it's going to be okay, that allowed us to kind of be leaders in flood recovery, because we could just kind of step into the breach and kind of make things happen. So with that, I know that Brad has always been about, let's get to it, let's put our faith in action. And what I would say is that anytime you have something good that is working, there are going to be forces that try to poison it and destroy it, right? I mean, that is the history of humanity, the history of institutions. Some people would talk about that as being part of spiritual warfare, however you want to talk about that. I just believe that there's always been this tension in religion, especially in Christianity, between the individual and the social, the societal, and how do we balance those? And right now we're just going through a time period where people have taken those strands of individuality and said, it's all about me, it's about putting up walls that protect me, it's about barriers, it's about me enforcing my will of how I view the world on to you. And I believe that, like, when Christianity was beginning, it was going up against this Roman system of imperialism and of kind of overtaxation and fighting back against individuality. And Jesus really was gathering people together to say, how do we in solidarity, as people with very little, take on this system of Roman occupation that is overwhelmingly strong? And people did it. If we look at like the Acts community, they came together and shared their resources and eventually helped to lead to the downfall of the Roman Empire. And so all of that is to say, I think that history has always been and will continue to be stronger than any other history, that is the long arc of history that bends towards justice. And so while it can feel overwhelming, I just believe that the welcome, the love, the care for one another is ultimately going to win, even in the darkest times. So, yeah.
Clint, two questions for you. First of all, do you know of anything that's happening to the area where Hy-Vee vacated and created a food desert there? either with Matthew 25 or anybody else. And the second question is how are your institutions doing financially? Corner store, Groundswell, are
Yeah.
they sustainable, getting sustainable? I just kind of like to know where you are on that.
Yeah, those are two really good questions. I'll tell you, Hy-Vee, we were involved in there. We went into that building, we climbed up on the roof, looked at all the mechanical systems, all that kind of thing. Hy-Vee was even willing to like say, you can just be in this space for free. We'll pay the rent, all of that, if you want to do a grocery store here. And it was overwhelmingly too big. Like we can't operate at that scale. And second, those systems have not been invested in for 20 years, like their HVAC system, refrigeration, all that kind of thing. So it was so outdated. It would have cost us so much to go into that building that it just didn't make sense. And I know the council, all kinds of groups have been looking at the micro action plan for First Avenue. They've been looking at the areas around it, how to improve it. They've been working to recruit a grocer out of Kansas City that could go in there. And those things are all really important. But I also would lift up that there are two immigrant-run grocery stores that will be locating right in that area. One that's literally a block away from where that was. And sometimes we look at those stores and we're like, well, yeah, but that's not our store. We want like a traditional white people's store. But I would say we should support those immigrant businesses that are starting and go in there and tell them, hey, I would shop here a little more frequently if you had this or this. And I think that's a really good way to go. And Matthew 25 will continue to look at other places where we can eliminate food deserts in the future. To the funding question, I'm just going to be totally transparent and honest. Like, I've been through floods, COVID, derecho, reconstruction of roads. The roof was blown off of our main building in the derecho. I've never been through a time that is this scary at Matthew 25. And I'm not even speaking about Matthew 25 funding. I'm talking about other helping agencies that we care about and are connected to, like Catherine McCauley Center or Catholic Charities or others that are just seeing their funding decimated, seeing government programs decimated, and just thinking like, how are we going to in any way be able to pick up this slack as the need rises and the resources go down? For us personally, we don't rely largely on government funding. So we feel okay about that we'll be able to make it through. So the good of that is that we've set ourselves up in a way where 50% of our income is earned income from rental properties, from grocery stores, from those kinds of places, and 50% is donations from folks like you. So I think we're in a good place, but I will say, if we enter a recession and way less people start going out to eat, that will have an impact on Groundswell. If we get to a place where the grocery thing I worry most about in terms of people in the neighborhood, because our grocery prices with tariffs are going to just automatically go up, right? There are certain things we can't grow all year in the US. And so if we have those extra costs, I guarantee you that we're not at the same time saying, oh, we're going to increase SNAP benefits, we're going to increase other things to keep up with those rising costs. So the people that will be hurt the most are those people that can't afford it. So I think for us, we'll be okay, but we'll just need more people to like say, hey, I'm going to plant an extra row this year so that I can bring it into the corner store and share it with others, or I'm going to go and drop a little extra in the tip jar so that I can pay for people's meals. But if all of you, and this is making a judgment not on all of you, but 60% of you being near retirement age, if all of a sudden your 401ks and retirement plans drop like a rock, you're probably not going to have as much money to give to any nonprofit. So if all the government funding goes away and all of the ability for people to give generously starts to decline, then that could be scary. So we'll see.
This is not the end of the questions. I have a question.
Yeah.
We're about 2 months from summer, and we know that kids who are in poverty often get a lot of their nutrients and nutrition and food from schools. And so what does that look like in Cedar Rapids? I'm from Des Moines, so I know what Des Moines does. What does that look like in Cedar Rapids, and particularly this summer with different cuts and various things, and how kids have access to food?
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's complex, right? I mean, right at the top of the list is the good and the bad of the governor. You know, there was this money coming from the federal government to help with summer meals. And the governor said, no, I have a better program, that we don't want that money. We'll just create our own program. And last year they, you know, did the pilot project, and it fed a fraction of the people that would have been fed from the federal program. And the federal program said, we won't give you a waiver on what we wanted you to do so that you can do that program. We won't provide any funding. Now, the suspicion is that the Trump administration will say, we'll give you a waiver so that you can scale up your program if there's funding for it. But even if it's scaled up, it's just not as good of a program. The one that the feds wanted to happen was a scattered site. Anybody can show up. It was at the park down the street from me. It was scattered all around town. People could just show up and get free meals. They could also get food from summer programs at their schools and that kind of thing. And those programs have all been drastically cut. So again, I think when you look at the stats and you say, okay, who are SNAP beneficiaries? It's a chunk of kids, right? It's a chunk of the elderly that depend on things like Meals on Wheels, and those funds are being reduced. So I think it's going to be a big, big challenge this summer. And so the more that we can do as individuals to kind of scale up and help, and the better. Yeah. There may be other people in here that know even more about that than me, but that's what I know. I mean,
You can just come up to Clint.
yeah, just yell at me, Jim.
Yeah, my question is, how do you expect that your programs will be impacted by the construction and operation of a casino right next to where most of the events are?
Yeah.
Clint, would you repeat the question?
Yeah,
so folks
yeah.
online hear it?
Yeah, the question was, our farm is located right next to where the casino is scheduled to go in, and so how will that impact the urban farm? That will be an interesting thing to see what happens. So we have 18 different lots, 2.5 acres. 5 of the, so if you've been to the urban farm, there's, I'll see if I can pull it back here to show you a little bit of the picture of it. Oh. So there's the main part of the urban farm, and then there is ancillary lots. I'm not going to find this, but there it is. So that main area has like the greenhouse, the playground, all of the outdoor brick oven pizza place, our tool supply area, all of that. That was requested to be purchased by the casino, and we said, no, we're going to stay in this neighborhood. And then across the street to the north, there are 5 other lots that were scattered lots that are have been used for community gardens. Those were also requested for purchase by the casino, and we did sell those lots to the casino. As a United Methodist pastor who, you know, has a long history of being anti-gambling, obviously I have feelings about that. But we also wanted to try to figure out how to balance it as best as we could. So we'll stay in the neighborhood. We'll continue to do all the programming that we've done. We've located another spot on the farm to do some of those community garden plots. You know, we've tried to work with the casino to say, can you do some public meetings to really be working with residents to think about things like extending security for the casino so that it's not just your property, it's kind of the neighborhood that you're watching out for. Would you be willing to think about targeting some of these funds that are going towards nonprofits to really go right into the neighborhood so that you can help with the places that will have the most be most impacted by this? They haven't been open to those conversations necessarily. They said once we get the license and all of that, then we'll start talking about specifics and how to be a good neighbor. So we'll wait and see what actually happens, but I think it's incumbent upon, you know, a lot of these things will have to go through public meetings, like how will the roads get configured? How much parking space will there be that's just kind of open and draining water into the floodplain? What kind of lighting will be used and how will it impact the neighborhood? Like, what we're going to need is for people to show up at those meetings and kind of say, this is what I think is best for the neighborhood, so that there's a little bit of pressure to do what will be most helpful. Yeah, so it's really complicated, and we'll do our best. We did pull all of the homeowners together to like negotiate jointly with the casino on prices and buyouts of their homes so that they wouldn't just kind of be picked off one at a time and not know what their neighbor was getting for a deal and that kind of thing. So we're trying to do the best that we can. So it's not perfect. Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about dreams for the future. If you had all the money in the world,
Right.
Where would you see Matthew 25 going and helping the community even more?
Yeah, so this was one little section of Matthew 25, right? There's rentals and rehabs and education at schools and all these other things that we do, community building and storytelling series. And we have created a lot of different things focused around these pillars of what makes a strong neighborhood. We believe that if people have access to high quality, affordable housing, mixed income housing, if they have access to good, healthy food, education that helps to support them to kind of chase after their dreams, and if they're connected to their neighbors, that neighborhood will be way stronger. And so we've created programs that support all of those pillars, right? Now, instead of creating more programs, we feel like we're in a place where we need to help other neighborhoods, other cities, that kind of thing, and start looking at how do we grow our scale. You know, I would love to have 10 grocery stores in lots of different food deserts. I'd love to be helping people to fix up their homes all over the place. So I really think it's going to be about how do we start to scale up in a sustainable, replicable way that is impacting more and more people. We've been tracking how many people just brush up against Matthew 25, and it's about, during the winter months, it's around 2,800 folks. Bye, Dave. Thanks for being here. Not to call you out and embarrass you at all, but it's good to have you here.
Unfortunately, not one of those people that are close to retirement.
Yeah, right. So yeah, I think it really is about scale and impact. Like I said, we impact in some way about 2,800 people a month. And maybe arrogantly so, we believe that if people brush up against Matthew 25, just even in a small way, that they're impacted, that they see something a little different, that they start thinking about, how can I share? How can I be part of making the world a better place? And so if we could go from 3,000 to 4,000 people that we brush up against every month to 15,000 or whatever, then we think we'd start to kind of help create this kingdom of heaven on earth. So just that small little goal. That's all we want to do. Yeah.
I'm interested in Matthew 25 beyond Cedar Rapids. I was just Googling, I'm finding it in some places. Is this a movement that can help to bring Christ back into Christianity? And is there a movement of Matthew 25? I've read about it in Presbyterian churches, but they're using it as a motif, I think.
Right.
So I don't know anything about it.
Yeah.
So I'm interested.
Yeah, that's a great question. So in terms of our history, we had a bishop in the 1990s, 2000s that was calling on every single Methodist church to create a Matthew 25 ministry of some sort. That was part of the inspiration, motivation that caused my brother and I, that were serving as pastors at local United Methodist churches, to say, do we really want to be in these churches, or do we want to be out working with low-income people? And so we both left our churches to start Matthew 25. And there were other things kind of around the state that started at that time. Since that time, the Episcopalians have had a Matthew 25 kind of theme for a while. Presbyterians right now are encouraging everyone to do Matthew 25 ministries. I really do think it is a loosely connected movement in some ways. There is a Matthew 25 ministry out of Ohio that is 50 times the size of us, that does a lot of work on disaster recovery and that kind of thing, that once in a while people actually send money to them instead of us, or to us instead of them. And so we've kind of back and forth talked a little bit with each other, but we are we're a standalone, locally based nonprofit, so we're not connected to a larger movement. In terms of bringing Christ back, that's a really interesting topic, right? I think it's both and. I think we as Christians need to remember our roots, and that things like Matthew 25 are it's one of the only mandates in Scripture where Jesus is like crystal clear. This is what you are called to do: to feed the hungry, to clothe the naked, to visit the sick that are in prison and in hospitals, and don't forget this part, to welcome the stranger or alien into your land, right? It should drive the ethos of the church and who we want to be. And I'm unapologetic about that's my faith, and that's what I'm seeking to grow. At the same time, we live in a pluralistic world, right? Where I think Christianity should be right alongside Buddhism, Judaism, all the other great religions, and we should be able to cross-culturally impact one another and learn from one another. And you find that Matthew 25 strain is, again, in all the world's great religions. So there should not only be a movement among Christians, there should be an interfaith, cross-cultural movement that says this is at the heart of all faiths. So thanks.
Any last questions? Well, help me to thank Clint, please, and all his work.
Thank you all. Thanks, Connie. It's great to be here.
You can come over here so that it's not a voice from afar on the online. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Clint, for your work with Matthew 25. Next month, if you have the little postcard that we give out at the beginning of the season, you'll see a speaker listed there. That's not who's going to be the speaker next month. We are in the process of changing that, and haven't been able to connect with him. So stay tuned. Hopefully we'll know by Tuesday when our next email goes out, and have that all arranged. So hopefully that will all happen and work its way out. We will still be up here, as I understand it, The construction downstairs is on time, and whoever knew that construction could be on time, that doesn't happen in my world. But by next fall, we'll be back downstairs in a beautiful space down there. But in May, we will still be in this space. So thank you for being here. Thank you for being part of Intersections and the work of Interfaith Alliance of Iowa. And have a lovely weekend. Thank you.